Good evening, America. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to the latest edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you from the nation's capital, where today Americans got a repeat piece of testimony from Dr. Anthony Fauci. All he could say is, watch what he said.
Although it pains me to do so, on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
He took the fifth more than 100 times. I think 111 is the final count that we came up with here by doing it. Nothing, right down to the color of his tie, would he answer. A man who always gave answers. We now know many of them he didn't believe because of what he wrote in his diary. Couldn't answer a single thing. Couldn't give any closure to the Americans who lost millions of their loved ones, or worldwide lost millions of their loved ones. Could not answer whether he funded the Wuhan lab, would not answer whether he really believed the virus was emanating from nature as opposed to being man-made, could not answer whether he funded gain-of-function research with our enemies in China. It was an extraordinary moment, but it didn't lack a lot of information. Senators came in time and time again and revealed things in their questions that we previously didn't know about Anthony Fauci, including the fact that he tried to apply for up to $1 million of money for himself personally in awards while he was running the pandemic. He was giving himself, or applying to give himself, cash awards for his performance in the pandemic. That went so wrong for all of us. Afterwards, the consequences for Anthony Fauci became very, very real. Rand Paul said he will seek a contempt vote against him for not answering questions, even though he has a pardon which protects him from federal prosecution. Quote, we believe, this is a direct quote from Senator Paul, we believe he didn't need to hide behind the Fifth Amendment, and that maybe the Fifth Amendment doesn't attach when you have a pardon in place. A second piece of news came out of the state of Florida shortly after the hearing ended, when the Attorney General there announced he's opened a criminal investigation into Anthony Fauci. Today was a starter gun moment for a lot of future endeavors focused on Anthony Fauci, his truthfulness, and whether he has any culpability civilly or criminally. With that, I'm going to turn to my amazing co-host, Amanda Head. Amanda, pretty amazing. Over and over again, nothing he could answer, he didn't feel incriminated him.
Yeah, and you're right, 111 times. I can't imagine saying the same thing over and over 111 times, but I guess if you're worried that your words might fold over on themselves, then you got to stick to that. And continuing on Fauci's hearing, John, aside from pleading the fifth, Dr. Fauci did have one thing to say in his opening statement. Instead of being transparent with the American people, Fauci, while looking very, very nervous behind the microphone, tried calling out Senator Rand Paul for, in Fauci's words, being obsessed with him. Take a listen.
The only conclusion I can reach is that the sole reason he is calling me before this committee is to get me to say something, anything, that could vindicate his repeated public pledges that I end up, in his words, quote, behind bars, unquote. Any reasonable person who has followed his unhinged obsession with me would readily come to the same conclusion.
Mm-hmm. So, according to Fauci, he has done nothing wrong. It's a witch hunt to get him behind bars. But if he did nothing wrong and it's a witch hunt, then why can't you answer the questions? But because of his refusal to answer any and all of those questions levied against him, even what color tie he was wearing, Paul's Senate panel will be taking a vote to hold Fauci in contempt of Congress. And that's not all. Earlier today at the White House, President Trump raised questions regarding the legitimacy of Fauci's preemptive pardon. He acknowledged the power of a presidential pardon, but suggested that Fauci's pardon could be problematic because it could possibly be reversed if there were sufficient evidence of the alleged illegitimacy of Biden's use of an auto pen. Now, President Trump said of Fauci's pardon from former President Joe Biden that the only pardon he knows for sure that Joe Biden actually signed was his own son's, Hunter Biden's, pardon, but that he wasn't sure that the former president actually signed Dr. Fauci's pardon because, of course, the Biden administration had access to and could have used that infamous auto pen that is on the presidential walk at the White House right outside the Oval Office. And instead of President Biden's picture, it is a picture of an auto pen machine.
It is, indeed. Well, auto pens, Fifth Amendment, civil litigation. Some parents now talking. We'll talk about that later in the show. Today, though, I think the most instrumental part of the hearing, the most valuable part of the hearing, was when senators asked questions that they knew Anthony Fauci wouldn't answer. They injected new facts that we didn't know about. One of those senators who did it over and over again, Senator Ron Johnson, who has pursued the COVID failures from the beginning, the pandemic failures from the beginning. Earlier today, we had a chance to talk to him. Have a watch of what we talked about. All right, folks, I can't think of a better way to start off today's show than to talk to one of the inquisitors today, as Dr. Anthony Fauci more than 100 times took the Fifth Amendment, refused to answer questions to the American public about how he administered the pandemic program, how we all suffered under it, what responsibility he had. Senator Ron Johnson was there. Though Fauci didn't make any news because he just kept saying the Fifth Amendment, senators did by asking questions that got to the heart of the issues. Joining us right now, Senator Ron Johnson. Sir, good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. There's a lot to follow up in this hearing because Fauci did nothing to help the American people understand what went wrong with the pandemic. What's the next step for the Senate and for you personally? Because you obviously have a very important role here.
Well, first of all, you have the count in terms of how many times he took the Fifth. He did not answer one question. I think it's important to point that out. The Democrats continue to fawn over him, even though now that we have his diary, we have other records, it's obvious that Anthony Fauci was just lying time and time and time again to the American public. I thought Chairman Paul did a great job in his opening statement, just laying out, really who Anthony Fauci was, how he completely lied about his thoughts on whether the virus was man-made or sprang from nature. It was obvious that he and the people that were consulting him certainly thought man-made, laboratory created was a very viable alternative, not the conspiracy theory that then they continue to claim it was. Josh Hawley did a masterful job of just laying out how grotesque Dr. Fauci was in terms of, and probably illegally, using his Senate staff, his Senate phones and devices to solicit awards that put over $1 million in his pocket during COVID. We just started getting the information of some of those awards, but Josh had he'd really researched that one and found out all the staff who had solicited some of these awards to enrich Anthony Fauci while people were dying in a pandemic, probably created by a man-made virus, made possible by his funding of gain-of-function research over the decades, quite honestly. So, I heard, it was a very bad day for Anthony Fauci, let's put it that way. Now, next steps, I mean, I was going to do this beforehand, but, I've got my own investigation. I'm highly frustrated that legacy news media are not picking up what I consider the biggest government scandal of my lifetime. The fact that Peter Marks knew that his algorithm was going to hide safety signals. They saw safety signals. They're denying to this day. So people injection injured aren't getting treated. So, we're continuing our interview. So we now have issued letters to former FDA officials that we want to interview. And as long as we're sending out letters based on Anthony Fauci's non-testimony, we sent him a letter for a voluntary transcribed interview, but a subpoena will follow very quickly if he doesn't comply quickly.
Wow.
Sir, I think his incessant pleading of the Fifth today enraged Americans. They feel like they deserve answers, and it was disrespectful to them to not give those. He also might have kicked a hornet's nest because Florida's Attorney General James Altmaier has announced that his state is going to be leading a state-level investigation, and then South Carolina's Attorney General Alan Wilson chimed in and updated on his state-level investigation. I know that the pardon covers Fauci for federal crimes, but it doesn't cover anything that states could levy against him. Did he kick a hornet's nest with this today?
He might have. I was literally inundated with questions for Fauci. Anybody knows me, you got to ask him this. What that tells me, there are so many questions that the American people deserve answers to, and Anthony Fauci, in many cases, is the only person who can answer those questions. And so for him to come in with a full pardon, so he really does not have the ability to plead the Fifth because he's under no threat of prosecution. He has immunity. So which is why Chairman Paul will hold a markup on voting Anthony Fauci in contempt. So that'll be the next step in terms of Homeland Security. We'll vote Anthony Fauci in contempt for not answering the questions he really was obligated to answer under the subpoena, particularly in the fact that he already has a pardon, so he has no legal jeopardy, unless you could argue that he might have legal jeopardy in states, and that's entirely possible because the Biden pardon is only for federal crimes.
Is it safe to assume that that vote on contempt of Congress will be along party lines?
When you listen to the Democrats fawning over St. Fauci, yeah, I'd say that's probably the case. I mean, I thought Bernie Moreno did a really good job pointing out that he could hardly wait to start running ads against the Democrats that were kissing his you-know-what. I mean, it's just, I mean, have they not been watching history? Did they not see how devastating our response to COVID was to so many people? The hospital protocols, the injection, the adverse events to those things, the shutdowns, the devastation to businesses and stuff. Did they not notice that? And did they not read his diary, how he's just contradicting himself time and time again? He says one thing in the diary, something completely different to the public that devastated the public. So I don't know how anybody who actually has information, who has their eyes open, who is curious, can really view Anthony Fauci not as the most famous scientist in America, but as the most infamous villain in probably American history, or certainly one of them.
Sir, yeah, no doubt. And the toll of the pandemic will ever be attached to him. The work you did to expose what once was a conspiracy theory, but was always true, that Anthony Fauci funded gain-of-function research. I was thinking of you last night around 8 o'clock when the State Department announced finally that President Trump and the Trump administration has formally banned a gain-of-function in the United States or in any foreign funding that we do going forward. You pushed hard to get the truth. A lot of people tried to suppress that truth. How important is it to have that ban back in place?
Extremely important, and I hope we never have another Anthony Fauci in office who does everything they can to circumvent the ban and then lie about it, or circumvent the ban and then lie about it. Now, we really have to understand what happened here. You know, this gain-of-function research is about creating what they say countermeasures to potential bioweapons. So in order to create a countermeasure to a bioweapon, you have to do what? Create the bioweapon. Of course, we signed treaties to prevent us from researching bioweapons. But, there's a loophole. Well, you can do it if you're producing a countermeasure. Of course, that countermeasure was the mRNA vaccine. Again, it's an injection. It's experimental gene therapy injection. I didn't even come close to scratching the surface of all the questions I have for Anthony Fauci in terms of his involvement in pushing this, what he did in terms of, do safety surveillance, which by the way, even though people like Tom McCullough and people at CDC, FDA were saying, oh, we're going to be watching this thing like a hawk. You lose a day of work and we're going to have a CDC representative call you up, see whether or not you should file a VAERS report. That was all complete bunk. What we're finding out in our investigation and in interviews literally sounds like these guys were not paying attention to safety surveillance. The only thing they paid attention to is if something was being mentioned, how could they quash that disinformation so that they wouldn't create vaccine hesitancy? I mean, again, I've been digging this. This corruption is so obvious to me and is just so enormously frustrating that the legacy media, again, not one major newspaper or network has covered my bombshell report about Peter Marks understanding that their algorithm is going to hide safety signals, and then all the safety signals, right, including, by the way, pulmonary infarction, which now, because of the diaries, we know Anthony Fauci suffered from. So I don't know how many shots or injections and boosters he got. He got COVID, I think, a couple of times. He suffered a pulmonary infarction, which is one of the safety signals that was signaling, but denied by Peter Marks. Again, you literally can't make this stuff up, but the legacy media is not covering it.
So Sir, before we let you go, one of the most important lines of questioning you led about ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. I hate to even bring up any silver linings from the COVID pandemic because so many people lost lives and livelihoods and so much more. But the American public now knows, thanks to you and people like you, how effective ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are in treating myriad issues, and it's extremely safe. Was that possibly one of the most important things to come out of this hearing?
I hope it's one of those things. The doctors that had the courage and compassion to treat COVID patients with things like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, they had their careers and lives destroyed because of people like Anthony Fauci and people in these federal health agencies. The families who begged and pleaded with hospitals, we're going to hold a public event on hospital protocols. I'm getting the testimonies now. They are heart-wrenching. But, one woman finally escaped the hospital. Her husband literally came out to spring her. There's like a 6-hour standoff with the police. The hospital called the police. They would not release this woman because they weren't properly treating her, okay? Finally, after a 6-hour standoff, she just asked a simple question: am I a patient or I'm a prisoner? And they weren't willing to admit she's a prisoner, so they let her go, and she survived because she got ivermectin.
Wow.
I know so many people who, reached out to me. I could connect them to doctors that had the courage and compassion, prescribed ivermectin. I mean, some of the turnaround was amazing. I mean, they could barely breathe within 6 hours or within a day. All of a sudden, they could breathe again, and they fully recovered. There's an attorney, Ralph Larijo, I think is how it's pronounced his name, and these are approximate numbers, but he started representing these families. Of the approximate 100 cases, let's say he won about half of them, 50. Only 2 of those people died, and they were too far gone. Of the 50 cases he lost, they all died. Again, those are rough numbers, but they're pretty accurate. So so whoever stayed on the hospital protocol, the remdesivir, the ventilation, they died. 80, 90% of the people on vents died. Why would you ever put somebody on a vent? Particularly when they're pleading with you, don't do it. They went in the hospital with, a Sharpie, no remdesivir, no ventilation. They still got remdesivir. Somebody literally, a wife begged them to allow her husband to get last rites. The only way the hospital would agree to it is if she agreed to a dose of remdesivir first. I mean, this is sick. I mean, I can't tell you how many testimonies across the country, different hospitals, different states. A loved one gets checked in, found out they're unvaxxed. Well, your dad's going to die. What'd you expect? They're not vaccinated. By the way, I'm unvaccinated. I didn't die. I never even contracted COVID, I don't think. I did test positive, so if I had COVID, I had an asymptomatic case. If I was asymptomatic, either the PCR test was way too sensitive and it was a misdiagnosis, or I already had natural immunity from maybe an earlier coronavirus. There's something similar, not the same type. Again, colds are either rhinoviruses or coronavirus. But most of them are rhinoviruses, but there's been coronavirus before. So maybe I had natural immunity. Of course, Fauci disavowed natural immunity, right?
Sure did.
Now he has so much to answer for, so much to be held accountable for. Today just began the accountability. But again, I gotta credit Chairman Paul. He's been dogged in his pursuit of this truth. I think this is a watershed moment. This is the moment the accountability begins with Saint Fauci.
You have turned a lot of narratives in America towards the truth and away from false, said Senator, whether it was Russia collusion, Hunter Biden, the COVID vaccine, or Anthony Fauci's foibles. We know the truth because you kept fighting and you didn't take a little bit of censorship as a stopping point for you. And our nation is grateful for what you've done. Great to have you on the show today, sir.
Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wow, folks, what a great interview. What a great moment today was just to watch that over and over again. All right, we got a quick commercial break. When we come back, Georgia Congressman and a doctor himself, Rich McCormick, is going to join us. He's going to weigh in on the Fauci hearings. He has a lot to say. I can't wait to hear about it right after these messages.
Welcome back, everybody, to Just the News, No Noise. Since Dr. Fauci refused to answer any questions in today's hearing, the Senate is planning to vote to hold Fauci in contempt. So what should accountability look like for Fauci? Joining us to discuss this and more is Dr. Marine Corps veteran and Congressman from the great state of Georgia, Rich McCormick. Congressman, thanks so much for being here.
Good to be with you today.
Sir, as a man who has served his country on the battlefield, in a medical facility and on Capitol Hill, I can imagine watching Dr. Fauci's testimony angered you and hurt you in a lot of different ways. But I want to focus on the medical part of this, because this is a guy who was supposed to be very, very precious with the American people, with their lives, with their safety. And he threw it all away. And today on the stand, it seems like he doesn't really care to see any type of justice.
Well, he wants to protect himself, obviously, and he knows he was wrong. When I had him in the hearings in the COVID era, when we basically came out of an entire era where I served thousands of patients as an ER doctor, and the entire COVID era was judged, was censored by the government, by Facebook, by at the time Twitter, because I said things that turned out to be true, but I wasn't allowed to disagree with the government, and that was all uncovered by our justice areas. Basically, we saw the Biden administration basically leaned on mass media to make sure that we were censored if we disagreed with the government. That's about as communist as you get. But everything we said, from face masks to vaccinations to immunity to treatments, doctors were right. The government was wrong. And yet we are the ones that were punished and they were let free. This is a step in the right direction. But quite frankly, I don't have too much faith that we're going to prosecute this guy. He's been pardoned by the Biden administration already. He's not going to incriminate himself. He's going to plead the fifth the entire time. But when we had him in hearings, and if you look at my hearings when I was questioning Fauci, the thing that disturbed me most is that he purposely made it almost impossible for you to go to school or to travel or to do anything, to visit anybody, unless you had a vaccination. He said specifically, you'll lose all that ideological BS. He said the word wholeheartedly, unless you do what we tell you. That's un-American. That's the government continuing to think they know better than you, thinking that you had to wear a mask, whether you had immunity or not, whether anybody around you had immunity or not. That just worries me to the most extreme degree, when we give our rights over to the United States government and it's okay. Shame on us for allowing it to happen. I hope it never happens in the future.
So I think about this often, that when you look back at 30,000 feet, perhaps the greatest victim of all in the Fauci era and the pandemic response was the doctor-patient relationship. All of a sudden, doctors were prevented from treating their patients the way they thought best, and one size fits all was imposed on us. That size turned out to be wrong on many different issues. Are we done anything to restore that special relationship between the doctor and patient and get Uncle Sam out of the middle of it?
Well, we try to get the CDC to not be politicized, to actual science applied, to allow doctors to practice without being questioned, to prescribe without being prescription, like we always have in the entire history of the United States. All progress in medicine has been done through dissenting opinions. At one time, we didn't believe in washing our hands in between patients. It was a way to show people we were rusty and had been around the block. But having a dissenting opinion, making sure you had, in this case, that you could use antipyretics such as Motrin or Tylenol to make sure that people could actually bring their temperature down, to actually use steroids, which we were told we couldn't do at first because the government determined what we're going to be right and wrong, to say that you shouldn't be vaccinated if you already have immunity because it's going to create a hyperimmune response and you're going to get pulmonary embolisms, you're going to get MIs, you're going to get strokes, you're going to have clots, deep venous thrombosis, which is basically clots in your legs, because you shouldn't have a vaccination when you already have immunity. That's going to cause a reaction that your body doesn't need to have. I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all. But there should be balanced every conversation where you have a conversation with your physician, you make an educated decision based on your body, your information, and that you're never forced to do something you don't want to do, that your rights aren't taken away because you disagree with the government. Otherwise, we are just as bad as China or any other country that has an autocratic government.
That's a great point.
Congressman, when it comes to the medical bureaucracy in this country, is it built to sustain a diversity of opinions? Because maybe the stars just aligned around COVID and it just happened so that we had the likes of Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx and Francis Collins and these people who all had the same, seemingly the same opinion. Did the stars just align like that? Or have we built a medical system in this country that the infrastructure is such that everyone is a part of the same idea blob?
Yeah, let me paint a picture that's very bleak and very alarming for everybody out there. This isn't just medicine. This could be the global climate change argument, which I had with scientists the other day, which were complaining about they weren't getting enough federal funding. I said, well, that's because a lot of federal funding has been misused. They said, oh, prove it. And then one of them said, well, at least we can agree on climate change, right? And I said, well, that depends on what you're talking about. If you think about the federally funded studies that they did, basically came to ill conclusion that weren't peer reviewed, that came to basically cherry pick science, which even Democrats said were false, were published as if it were science. We funded that as a government. That's climate change. Go over to medicine. You can talk about all the things that we studied that were not studied fairly. We didn't do any retrospective studies. We didn't do anything that was peer reviewed. We didn't do anything that actually showed when it was and when it was comprehensive. It was shown that it was the original studies were false. The stuff that we are studying were predetermined. They wanted to make sure the government was sustaining its own opinion. And by the way, that's not just medicine. That's everything the government gets involved in. When they pay you, when they give you a grant to do a study, to come up with something that they want you to come up with, and they'll defund you if you don't come up with that study. That's not science. And that's why we don't trust the government anymore. That's why we get worried about that doctor-patient relationship when we say, hey, we're going to threaten your license unless you believe what the government believes. That's why there's so much distrust with the government, with the CDC, with the patients, and that's what's really the biggest travesty.
So we got about 45 seconds left before the break, but real quickly, we got evidence today that Fauci was trying to have his staff help him win awards for his COVID response, cash awards for him. Is it time to end the ability of a federal employee to make money off their job?
I can't believe that was ever legal. It's absolutely the time. I don't think that any government official should ever benefit from anything they do in the government. That's all the way from the president down to the lowliest bureaucrat. I just think that that's insider trading, and it's always been illegal and always should be.
Absolutely. Congressman Rich McCormick, we appreciate you, all of the types of service that you do for this country.
Summer is in full swing. Routines are different. People are traveling, families are getting together, and this is a great time to check in on something most people ignore. Your blood pressure. Don't take the risk. I've been paying a lot more attention to my own blood pressure numbers lately, and that's incredibly important. And that is because nearly half of all of adults have high blood pressure, and most don't even feel it until there becomes a serious problem. There are no warning signs. It just quietly damages your body over time. And that's exactly why July is such an important time to get a check-in. If you're worried about it, try one of my favorite drinks, 120 Life. It's a once-a-day functional drink made with ingredients that help support healthy blood pressure. Drink it, then check your numbers. And for a lot of people, they see improvement as little as 2 weeks. I did actually. It's amazing. Try it for 14 days. If your numbers don't improve, you get a full refund. That's a good deal. It tastes great, and it's made from a blend of superfruit juices, and the powdered version has just, get a load of this, 1 gram of sugar. Go to 120life.com. That's 120life.com, and use my code JTN for 20% off. Try it risk-free for 2 weeks. If your blood pressure doesn't come down, you'll get a full refund. Go to 120life.com and use that promo code JTN to save 20%. All right, folks, going back for the commercial break. No day discussing Anthony Fauci's foibles would be complete without our next guest, without Dr. Peter McCullough. We would not have known how far adrift our public health establishment was. He was a lone voice in the wilderness for a long time. History has shown he was right and Dr. Fauci was wrong. And today we were reminded of that when Dr. Fauci had to plead the fifth rather than answer questions about what he did as America's top public health officer. Joining us now, one of our great partners, the chief scientific officer at this wellness company, as I always will say for the rest of my career, the doctor that had it right at COVID, Dr. Peter McCullough. Sir, good to have you on.
Thank you.
All right. I think people were looking for some answers today, maybe a little closure after the 6 years of suffering people have done, whether it's the vaccines, their children behind in schools, the effect of lockdowns, and all they got was one continuous same answer more than 100 times. I plead the fifth. How will America remember today?
Well, I tell you, I think today is historic. So here we have someone who, led America, largely led the world on the public health response to the COVID-19 pandemic. He leaves his diary up on government servers for years, almost for people to find. They are found. And we learned so much about what was going on behind the scenes, what he really knew and thought, and then what he was telling the public were two different things. He shows up heavily guarded. He reads his opening statement. He was trembling, shoulders slumped. He was in a frown. The body language, John, it was guilt. all the way with a capital G.
Dr. McCullough, there are a number of indicators that this guy thinks he is above the law. The fact that he showed up the last time to testify and possibly perjured himself, I assume he thinks that nothing's going to happen. As you said, he left this diary up publicly. It seems like for a lot of these medical professionals, especially the ones that are part of the bureaucracy, they feel there is a separation between law and justice and what they do in the name of science, or as Anthony Fauci said, if you question the science, you question me, you're questioning the science. Is that still the case? Is there still way too much of a separation between the medical establishment in Washington and an instance where they could be punished for lying to the public?
I think that's a good analysis. Fauci and his attorneys clearly are positioning him with his preemptive 10-year pardon. With that clemency, they are positioning him that he doesn't need to answer to the public. And I think the Republican senators, Senator Rand Paul and Ron Johnson, Bernie Moreno, they were on point, Josh Hawley. But I was shocked that the Democrats, instead of asking questions and wanting to learn about what happened through the pandemic, what Fauci knew, instead they just heaped praise on him. So here's the Washington establishment politicizing a pandemic response where people really did die of COVID illness and they really did die after the vaccines. And here we are, really our Republican standards for truth, I think, really held up strong and they pushed for it. Fauci pled the fifth, so we're going to have to see where this goes from here. His diary is revealing.
It really is. There are many things in it that you see contradictions from what he was saying publicly and then what he was musing privately, realizing that the people he would later ask to write the letter saying it was natural origins themselves didn't believe what they were writing. There doesn't seem to be that Hippocratic oath notice that, as a doctor, I should do no harm. It seems like he was okay with the harm and being willing to give a public statement and a private statement that were very different. As a doctor, judging him on the mores of doctor and the obligations doctor have, how does he fare given the evidence we now know?
This is despicable. During the pandemic, I went on hundreds of times on national TV in 2020, 2021, 2022. I was treating patients, developing protocols. Ultimately, we formed the wellness company. I was doing public health. There's nothing in his memoirs that indicate he could care anything about Americans' health. He wasn't treating any patients, expressed no concerns whatsoever. He was spending all of his time in self-aggrandizement. He was applying for cash prizes, giving himself credit for ending up on CNN and on the media multiple times. He was manipulating the media, and he was clearly undermining Trump and the White House task force.
Yeah, very important part.
Dr. McCullough, we had Senator Ron Johnson on the show earlier, and he talked about how important, in this hearing, how important it was that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were either used or not used in a lot of these cases. You have worked very hard to make sure that people know about how safe and how efficacious, especially ivermectin is, and the world is now learning just how much that's true. Have you detected that among the American public, people are considering it now safe? And we've had a lot of conversations about its efficacy with respect to cancer. Are people warming up to the idea of that? Or are there still a lot of people in the Democrat camp who, as we saw today, they are willing to criticize anything if it is attached to Trump or Republicans?
The public is waking up. Ivermectin, safe and effective, indicated across a whole variety of infectious diseases and now off-label for its anti-neoplastic properties. But I think the safety of ivermectin is important. Senator Johnson brought basically about 6 inches worth of studies showing that it was effective, particularly the ICON study done in Florida, over a 50% reduction in mortality for acute COVID-19. It should have been offered to each and every patient with acute COVID-19. Johnson pointed out that sadly people had to get attorneys to force their doctors to give ivermectin in the hospital. Sometimes even then the hospital doctors refused. So this entire medical establishment, which looked up to Fauci and did not, put the patient's interests first now, I think is going to come under greater and greater scrutiny. People are turning to the wellness company because we've been honest with Americans ever since 2022, bringing them the truth and bringing the products that they need to stay healthy.
One other thing happened in the last 24 hours that perhaps is as magnanimous in size and importance as the Fauci hearing today, and that was the Trump administration last night formally ended gain-of-function research, dangerous research. It's something you've talked about for a long time. The president got it done. The State Department announced it last night. How important is that for the safety of the world?
That's very important. Not only just government funding, but we need to end it altogether. It's like having mad scientists trying to create nuclear bombs in academic laboratories. We can't have it. It's simply too dangerous. This idea of getting ahead of nature has led to misadventure. All experts agree if there's going to be another pandemic, it's going to come out of an academic biolab, and we're going to be in deep trouble, just like with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So I say goodbye to gain-of-function research. There's other ways we can advance knowledge and do it safely.
Before we let you go, Senator Johnson mentioned a panel or testimony, a roundtable, I think, that he's going to have regarding hospital protocol and some of those terrorizing stories that you mentioned where patients were either forced to take something like remdesivir, forced to have a tube down their throat. Can that change, or is that something that is systemic? How do we overhaul how that all went down? Because patients need to be able to say, no, thank you.
The major hospital CEOs and chief medical officers have to be present and accountable. They have to explain to America that while the WHO in November of 2020 said, do not use remdesivir, it doesn't work and it could lead to complications, they have to explain why they continue to use remdesivir. Even today, remdesivir is still being used against WHO guidance, why that's being done in the United States, why patients' wishes and their families' wishes weren't honored, why shared decision-making went out the window. And I tell you what, they have a long ways to go to win back the trust of the public. The hospitals, like Fauci, failed miserably through the pandemic.
Yeah, they sure did. Well, one thing we do know about the post-pandemic era is that you've helped us all to restore the doctor-patient relationship by bringing telemedicine, by allowing Americans to take back their medical decisions. And we wouldn't have that without your extraordinary company, the Wellness Company, or you, Doctor. Great to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate everything you do and all the time you spend with us making us smarter. It's always helpful. Folks, we have a special partnership, as you know, with that Wellness Company. If you want to take advantage of that and protect yourself and be prepared for the next calamity before it happens, go to twc.health/justnews and use that promo code JustNews. You're going to get 10% off. That's twc.health/justnews. Promo code JustNews, 10%. They're ivermectin, they're medical emergency kits, best in the business. Go check them out today. Back in a second with more right after these messages. America, one of the most important Cold War stories isn't the one most Americans were taught in school. That's exactly why you should see Angel's newest film, The Brink of War. It tells the story of one of the most consequential moments of the Cold War when world leaders were forced to make decisions that could have changed history forever. If you're planning to see it, here's the best way to do it. Become a premium Angel Guild member. You'll get 2 free tickets to The Brink of War, plus access to Angel's entire streaming library and tickets to future theatrical releases. That's a great deal. And for a limited time, use the promo code NEWS when you purchase an annual premium membership to get 4 months free. Go to angel.com/JTN and use the promo code NEWS, and you'll see a lot more at the movies.
Welcome back, everybody. Have you ever been sound asleep when suddenly a searing pain shoots through your calf and literally pulls you out of bed? If you have ever experienced a nighttime leg cramp, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is excruciating and miserable, but your muscle tightens. The pain can be so incredibly intense. You jump out of bed trying to stretch it out. And for some people, it happens over and over again. And what's surprising is that millions of Americans assume that these cramps are simply part of getting older. But what if they're actually a warning sign? What if your body is trying to tell you something long before a more serious problem develops? Joining us now is Dr. Chad Walding, physical therapist and co-founder of Native Path, one of our great partners here. Dr. Chad, thanks so much for being with us.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, John. So good to be here. Thank you.
Good to have you. And, I notice leg cramps when I am working out, but also when I'm dehydrated. What causes that dehydration? Is there something we can do about it?
Yeah, honestly, this is one of the most common questions I would get as a physical therapist, like what is going on with my cramping? It's important to know that the cramping in and of itself isn't the problem. It's a symptom, right? The real question is, why is the muscle cramping? And the root cause of that really comes down to a hydration and electrolyte imbalance. And most people never connect the dots on that. And they do things like you're talking about. They stretch, they rub it out, they drink water, they go back to bed, but the pattern keeps repeating over and over. And it can really mess you up because you don't sleep well, and that really impacts the rest of the day. So what's really needed, right? The muscles need water, but they don't just need water, they need electrolytes as well. And that's to help it function. Electrolytes help your health at a cellular level, helps those muscles relax and contract and not cramp up so much. They regulate the nerve signals behind the muscle contraction, right? In low hydration, when we have low hydration, low electrolytes, that's when the muscles, they're going to become irritable, they're going to cramp, they're going to be prone. You can think of a car with a low engine, a low oil, right? It runs for a while, but then it starts misfiring. So we don't want that.
I want to turn to something that I don't think a lot of people understand, and it took me a little while to put this together. So we are we think water is the key to hydration all the time, but really it's those 29 other ingredients. And you the first time you said this 29 ingredients, that's a lot in a single drink, but they're all things that make that hydration absorption possible, right? And they are the missing ingredients when you're just chugging the water.
Exactly. And the big issue here is what you said first. Like, a lot of people think that drinking water alone is enough, but water alone is not enough. 100 years ago, when our ancestors would drink water, they would drink spring water. It in and of itself had vitamins and minerals inside of that water. But now we're drinking water that's been filtered. Heck, it's got fluoride in there. There's all these things in there that we lose when it goes through a filtering process. So what we have to do is put the minerals and the vitamins and the electrolytes back in there so the body's getting what it actually needs. So hydration, it's not just what you drink. You can drink water all day, but you may still feel that tired, cramping feeling. The electrolytes are going to help you get the water actually into your cells. The amino acids that we put in there, we put 9 essential amino acids. That's going to support absorption, the utilization of the water at the cellular level. And then I mentioned that the 29 vitamins and minerals. You're getting all these things that nature wants you to have, but you've been missing out on. So when you start getting that stuff back in, you're shuttling water back into your cells. Your cells need water throughout. You've heard probably the analogy we're like 70% water, like the earth. We need all that stuff, so we absorb, and it's gonna result in better energy, better recovery, fewer cramps, which is what the main focus of this is, but also better mental focus, fewer afternoon crashes. And the great thing is, it's going to improve your energy, but this is not a stimulant. It's not caffeine. You're not masking things. You're supporting your body at a basic physiological level and giving it what it needs.
Dr. Chad, before we let you go, it's summertime. It is miserably hot practically everywhere in the country. I know they say to stay hydrated, and we can do that through Native Hydrate. How often do we need to be drinking it?
I recommend at least twice a day. So, what I recommend, no matter what, first thing in the morning, that's the time when you're most dehydrated. But the second time, do it when you're outside. Do it when you're sweating a lot. Do it when you're in the gym. Anytime you're perspiring a lot, you're giving away a lot of fluids. You're also giving away electrolytes. That's the perfect time to put it back in.
I love it. Dr. Chad Walding, always amazing information. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you both. Good to be here.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. And to learn more about Native Hydrate and today's special offer, visit nativehydrate.com/justnews. That's nativehydrate.com/justnews.
At Just the News, we break the stories others in the media ignore or are too afraid to tell. We did it on Russia collusion, Hunter Biden, and the security and intelligence failures that preceded January 6th. Our stories have real impact and reach because we stick to the facts. I'm John Solomon. You can help me expand our honest, unvarnished, and unbiased reporting by becoming a premium member at Just the News. You'll get an ad-free experience and exclusive member-only access to events, and you'll be helping us dig up more truth. Join today at justthenews.com/subscribe. Welcome back, America. Just a few more minutes before we set you into the night and now off to Grant Stinchfeld. Amanda, I want to turn to something that I think a lot of people have on their mind. What's next? All right. We know that Fauci took the fifth. We know there's going to be a contempt vote. We know that Florida's Attorney General Utheimer is considering criminal prosecution. I got a new element today on my podcast. I was talking to Tiffany Justice, one of the co-founders of Moms for Liberty, one of the great parental rights experts. And she said there are a group of parents right now beginning to put together a class action lawsuit against Fauci and the government for ruining their children's futures and lying to the American people. Obviously, all medical decisions are based on informed consent. Yeah. If you know what you're telling the public is false, which is what the diary of Fauci seemed to suggest, you may have opened up the litigation. The negligence standard trumps the protection that federal employees normally enjoy. I have a funny feeling that today was the starter pistol for an era of lawfare that we probably couldn't have imagined a few years ago.
Listen, you tick off mamas and papas across this country, and there is hell to pay. Yeah, and look, the repercussions were not just academic. Obviously, the kids who were in those formative years, especially middle school and high school, they suffered academically because of what they were not learning in classrooms, but also socially. I mean, there are very, very important social cues that you see from people's faces, things that you pick up on that develop you as a human, that help you in life. I mean, these people are going into the workforce now, and they don't have the social skills required to sit in a boardroom and have a civil conversation with some and have that personal interaction.
Every day, I still see somebody walking down the street with a mask on, which is amazing.
My Uber driver today. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Without any basis for it whatsoever. Yeah. We personally scarred those people into thinking that it's the only way they're going to be able to live going forward. There were some pretty great moments today. The F-bomb moment from Bernie Marino. Who the F do you think you are? I thought Senator Hawley's moment with Dr. Fauci got it best. I think you may have a little clip there we could show.
You got rich while people were dying, hundreds of thousands of Americans, over 1 million in the end, and you were getting rich. And not only were you doing that, you were using federal employees with taxpayer money to apply for and solicit cash prizes for you personally. Cash prizes totaling over $1 million. You did all of that during the pandemic, didn't you? That's a question.
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution.
I think it's a thirst for fame and a thirst for clout. Obviously, money is attached to this and power is attached to it. But Anthony Fauci was hailed as a saint during COVID, and I don't think he wants to let that go.
No, and neither were the Democrats who tried to defend him without actually looking at the state of the facts.
They're still doing it. Yeah.
They are, right? I mean, literally, now today they did it. Yeah. I think one of them said that this was a Joe McCarthy moment today. The hearing, it was not anything like that. There were actual real facts posited today, including what Senator Hawley said there. Yeah. What a day, what a week. Yeah. But I don't think it's over. I think today was a starting pistol for a lot more serious stuff ahead.
Listen, I had an Uber driver today who was wearing a mask, but I had an Uber driver last night from Canada who said that COVID was what woke him up to the medical blob and how you really just have to kind of be responsible for yourself and to do your own research.
Something Peter McCullough made possible, the Wellness
Absolutely.
Center.
Absolutely.
All right, folks, we're going to let you take things into your own hands for the next hour. You're getting right over to Grant Stinchfeld. You're in good hands for that.